Well, welcome back to Keneally and Cameron. We have, of course, just finished a discussion with Labor Senator Deb O'Neill about health. In just a moment, we're going to talk to Paul Fletcher, the member for Bradfield, Liberal member for Bradfield, the Parliamentary Secretary for Communications, all around good guy, I've got to say. And, you know, Ross, you gave a bit of a advertisement earlier for your QC friend. No, I'm done. I'm still talking. Okay, for your QC friend.
Yes.
And I'm just going to say I reckon Paul should be on the front bench. So if we're giving advice, as you were earlier, to Tony Abbott, that's my advice. Promote Paul Fletcher. Well, but having done that ad for him, why don't we welcome him? Look at him. Is he blushing? It's hard to tell.
Very pleased to be with you.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
Good to have you with us. Now, I'm going to read one or two tweets before we get to one of the big brains of the coalition. But, of course, one of Tony Abbott's problems is he's surrounded by this bristling talent. And, you know, he can basically pick anyone. And
yet he picked George Brandis and...
is certainly on the front rank.
I'm sorry, George.
OK, we have Grappy.
Yes.
If the shortfall in Medicare costs is now $10 billion and will double to $20 billion, how will looking at percentages fix that problem? Good question, Grappy. I'm right with you, brother.
Although we might observe that Medicare was never meant to recover its cost. It was never set up to be a cost recovery scheme.
What we're trying to do is make it sustainable, OK? So it's doubled in 10 years, about to double again. And Deb is saying, no biggie. Well, maybe it is a biggie, Deb. OK, wait a second. Second one.
I think it's a relative cost. It's a, well, then let's read that one.
Dead. So, Cam, presumably that's me, you scholar, thank you. The $5 is going to a fund and is not going to fund Medicare. So how is this going to make it more sustainable? Well, look, this is an absolutely fair question, which I'm happy to answer, but instead I thought we might ask Paul Fletcher.
Well, I think there's a couple of things about the $5 co-payment. The first is it's designed to send a price signal to consumers of medical services, and this is about getting this trend in growth in Medicare spending under control. So we've gone from $9 billion to $20 billion in 10 years, expected on present trends to go to $34 billion. As you said, we're only raising about $10 billion in tax revenue on the Medicare levy. So if we want to keep our world-class health system sustainable and able to deliver the services that Australians expect, we think it's sensible that those who have a capacity to pay should be asked to make a modest co-payment when it comes to going to see the GP, which after all is not free to provide, it's expensive to provide. So we're moving to a system, proposing to move to a system under which there's a $5 co-payment. Now bear in mind, those on concession cards, children under 16, certain other categories are excluded from that because we've listened to the concerns of the community about equity and fairness, and we've made some changes to address that. But what we've sought to do is maintain this fundamental principle in terms of a co-payment and a price signal for people who have the capacity to pay, so that we're not giving the false impression that healthcare is free to provide. It's certainly very far from free to provide, and so that we can make the funding of the system sustainable so we can continue to deliver Australians the world-class healthcare and Medicare that they expect.
So the $5 optional co-payment is meant to be a price signal?
It is, that's correct.
And so on non-concessional card holders, has the government done any modelling as to what type of price signal that's going to send to people who can afford to pay?
Look, it's not a novel proposition that, charging a price affects people's behaviour. It's one of the most fundamental propositions in economics. And you know, it's a proposition that's been well respected in health policy for many, many years because, of course, we have the co-payment under the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. So if you go to a chemist to purchase a drug that's on the PBS that may cost, in some cases, hundreds of dollars to provide, you'll be charged at the moment $36.90. And that principle has been well accepted and supported by the Labor Party for many years. So when in government, they've accepted the importance of addressing these issues and having a co-payment in place. Now, of course, they're in opposition and they've been hit with the irresponsibility disease.
Okay, I want to understand, though, of the non-concessional adult card holders, do you have any sense how many of them are going to a bulk bill GP? That is, they're not paying, they're totally free now.
The statistics are, I believe, that about 70% of non-concession card holders today are being bulk billed.
Are being bulk
Yes.
billed. So, and the government is of the view, clearly you think, a $5 co-payment is going to send a price signal that will cause people to think twice about whether they need to go to the doctor.
What we expect to do is incrementally affect the rate of growth in the Medicare funding, the amount the Commonwealth pays as the subsidy into Medicare, in other words, the aggregate of all of the individual rebates. There are about 275 million services bulk billed last year, for example. That's, when you aggregate that up, that's how you get to the 20 billion or so that's being spent. And so that's growing at a very fast rate. So this is about changing that rate of growth through the use of the price signal. It's also about, of course, the proceeds of the co-payment are going to go into the Medical Research Future Fund. That will continue to grow until it reaches a balance of $20 billion. The interest on that should come close to doubling the amount of money going into health funding, medical research funding in Australia each year. That's an area where Australia has proven strengths and capabilities.
So you really hope that this comes through in two ways. One is savings, because people do think twice about whether they really do need to go to the doctor, but that's only going to be about maybe 60% of us will be getting that price signal.
Well, that's
the
better
population.
than a poke in the eye, isn't it?
Well, you know, 60% of us.
Million odd people, about
so
8 or 9 million
are concessional card holders.
And then you've got the kids under 16
the carve
as well.
out. I think they're in the carve out.
Yeah.
I think the 8 million includes the kids under 16. So about 60% of us are going to get a price signal, and that's going to apparently slow enough growth. People are going to think twice about going to a doctor, and you're going to achieve some savings. And to answer we started this segment, can you explain to our viewers how the Medical Research Fund is going to, in your view, make a contribution?
Well, Medical Research Future Fund is a very important strategic measure to increase the amount of money going into medical research in Australia. Now, economic dryers like Ross and I feel a bit nervous about government doing things that the private sector should do, but most economists will tell you that basic research is something that is best funded by government or by a government-controlled fund like this, because it's very hard for any one private organisation to capture the benefits of that research. But if you have a research infrastructure, as we do in Australia, a very high-quality one, some 5 Australians have won Nobel Prizes in medicine or related disciplines. We've got a proven track record with things like the cervical cancer vaccine, medical devices companies like Cochlear and CSL and so on. ResMed. These are global Australian successes, and this depends upon the intellectual property being developed in Australia. So the research being developed in Australia, the medical research that can then be commercialised and capitalised on. So it's an important piece of economic policy. It's also a very important piece of medical and health policy, because extra money going into medical research is going to help us make some of those breakthrough discoveries that will fundamentally change the way we deal with particular conditions in the future.
Look, my understanding is there are, that's right, two ways in which this makes the system more sustainable. One is the Holy Grail, which is the hope that we solve the problem of diabetes and it substantially reduces tax burden. But secondly, the government is already heavily funding medical research straight off the budget bottom line every year, and that if you can create a capital base that will do that job, you can release more money for the discretionary spending. That's the argument. But I just make the point, 270 million, what are we saying? That there's 23 million Australians, 270 million doctor visits, that's more than 10 per person.
And
We've got to put the brake on here, boys and girls. Stay with us though, because we are going to a break right now.